Opinion Nation, is it time to rethink ICE? ICE is there's a growing chorus on the left to get rid of ICE, to abolish it. Protesters feel the nation's immigration policies have become abusive and even cruel. In Portland, Oregon, protesters have blocked ICE headquarters for days. A Wisconsin lawmaker has introduced legislation to abolish ICE.
What we're talking about is an agency that I think the people who work for it are trying to do their very best, but it's been directives from the president that have really made this agency not what it was when it was created after 9/11 to protect the country from terrorism and other matters. Now it's become an agency that goes into workplaces and churches and schools and picks up people who have traffic tickets. It's being done as the president's police force so that he can somehow justify the need for a wall.
The ACLU has filed a lawsuit alleging ICE is holding asylum seekers without cause. Others have accused ICE of overzealously separating parents from their children at the behest of the Trump administration. Actually, ICE is now seen by some as the president's personal police force, and that would be something totally un-American. Opinion Nation, is it time to rethink ICE? Let's talk about that. With me today is attorney and immigration analyst Raul Reyes. Jessica Vaughn is here. She's the director of policy studies for the Centers for Immigration Studies. And Republican strategist Luis Alvarado also joins me. I'm going to start with you, Luis, because in Philadelphia, there are people blocking the door just today that were arrested. This is a growing cry across the nation to abolish ICE. Is that something that needs to be done?
Well, ICE has morphed from INS, which is strictly immigration enforcement after 9/11. It became a paramilitary unit that worked in conjunction with the military and law enforcement. And it was doing this job basically to work to protect the nation from terrorism. Now it's actually become an incredibly strong political arm of this administration. And when it comes to ICE, they are mission tasks. So we have to ask ourselves, you know, it's not, are they doing a good job or a bad job? Is who's actually directing and giving them the mission orders and who's holding them accountable? And the question actually should be the triangulation between the local governments, the White House, and the leadership at ICE. When you see ICE standing at the border taking selfies with Fox reporters, you have to ask yourself, are they actually being too political?
So I guess my question would be, Raul, it's Mr. Trump's policies. And, you know, ICE's mission is to carry out the laws that are enacted in our country. And you could argue that's exactly what they're doing. So why attack ICE? Why not just attack the Trump administration's policies?
Well, I certainly think that there is room right now at this particular point in our political climate to attack both. Now, to be realistic, I do not think that it is feasible under this Congress or even the next Congress to abolish ICE. I just don't think that's going to happen. However, certainly if I had to choose between keeping ICE as it is now or eliminating it, I would be on the side of abolishing ICE. And the reason is because ICE its agents act with tremendous discretion. There are numerous documented instances where they have trampled on the constitutional rights, the due process rights of American citizens, of lawful permanent residents, and certainly the undocumented people. When someone is taken into custody by ICE, for example, many people don't realize that the affirmative burden of proof is on that person to prove that they are a citizen. And what we're seeing is that has resulted, for example, in California, one man was held for 1,200 days in ICE custody who was an American citizen. We have credible reporting of abuses in ICE shelters. Between 2010 and 2016, there were 33,000 complaints of abuse in ICE detention centers. Even the Department of Homeland Security's own Inspector General found the conditions in 4 out of the 5 ICE detention facilities that it examined inhumane. There was a lack of hot water. So we have all of these troubling conditions within ICE, and yet it is an agency that operates largely free from oversight, accountability, and with a very troubling lack of transparency.
Okay,
that's
so
why I think
Jessica,
ICE needs to be radically reformed.
I was just going to ask about oversight, because somebody's got to be watching over ICE to see if they're performing their duties responsibly. There's no one?
Oh, of course there is. There's congressional oversight, and there's a lot of media attention on ICE activities, although, frankly, a lot of it is very uninformed and one-sided and exaggerated. It's absurd to call for the abolition of ICE because everyone acknowledges that, if we're going to have immigration, there have to be rules and restrictions and limits. And those rules have to be enforced for the benefit of people who come to this country legally, and for the benefit of Americans. Immigration laws are not obsolete laws that don't deserve to be enforced anymore. They protect job opportunities for Americans. They protect taxpayers from having to fund benefits and services for people who aren't entitled to be here. And they protect our communities by focusing on that fraction of the immigrant population that is committing crimes. These are all really valuable forms of enforcement that belong in a federal law enforcement agency like ICE that works closely with state and local law enforcement.
Right.
And frankly, if we need the kind of reform that we need is to clarify ICE's authorities and enable them to work more seamlessly with state and local authorities so that they can be efficient and effective and protect our communities.
You would think that maybe Democratic politicians would take that as a first step, but they've gone to abolish. I mean, Governor
that's election
or the Mayor
sloganeering
de Blasio of New York is for abolishing ICE. There, Kamala Harris, Senator, she's thinking that maybe it's time we do abolish ICE. Kirsten Gillibrand is campaigning on abolishing ICE. So, Luis, is that the way to go?
No, absolutely not. ICE has a mission. If there's any qualms that I have with ICE, is the fact that they need to, if you give somebody a mission, especially a paramilitary organization, an agency a mission, they have to be prepared. They have to be trained. They have to be provided with resources and support. But most importantly, they need to be provided with leadership. ICE, I think, has not been provided with that type of training, especially for this new mission, for the zero tolerance policy that this administration wants to enforce. ICE members are not trained to be child care facilitators, especially for children that are kept alone in cages. Then you need to have some kind of process that involves other agencies, so you don't trample on the one thing that's most important in this nation, and that's our Constitution and what we perceive as to be our way of life.
I was curious to get the perspective from somebody who actually worked for ICE, and I talked with a former acting director named John Sendwig, and I just want to play for our viewers what he said about ICE and whether it's become politicized. Let's listen.
Everything that's been directed to the field offices is very clear in the sense that there is no more priorities. Everybody who's in this country unlawfully is a priority. The problem, though, is when you treat everyone equally, when you say that the person who's been here 20 years and never committed a crime is equal to the MS-13 gang member, you dilute the ability of ICE to focus on the bad guys. I think what you also do is you undermine the reputation of the agency. I mean, look, I get the frustration of these groups, but the protest ICE itself, or the call for the elimination of ICE itself, kind of misdiagnoses the problem. The problem isn't ICE. The problem is the administration and these immigration policies.
So you heard what he said, Raul. The problem is still the administration's policies, not ICE itself.
I would respectfully disagree with him on that to a certain point, because these problems with ICE, to be blunt, they existed during the Obama administration as well. And when we speak of the possibility of abolishing ICE at a broader level, remember, getting rid of a federal agency is not in itself a radical concept. Republicans generally favor small government and have been, for example, in favor of getting rid of the IRS, or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And to the earlier guest's point, when she talked about abolishing ICE means that we will not enforce immigration law. No one is suggesting that we don't enforce immigration law, but immigration law can be better enforced by an agency whose mission has not become so corrupted as ICE. For example, transferring some of ICE's duties to Customs and Border Protection or to the U.S. Marshals. The fact is, ICE, in its everyday activities, is terrorizing immigrant communities, making them very fearful of cooperating with law enforcement to come forward as witnesses. This has been very harmful to our Latino community, where we see many people swept up in ICE raids and as collateral arrest when they have a lawful right to be in this country. And when we have a government agency that is flat out causing so much harm with so little transparency, then we have a problem. And to me, even having this discussion about whether we should abolish ICE is very helpful, in that is a starting point for radically reforming this agency, which is what I believe is needed.
All right, I have to end it there. Raul Reyes, Jessica Vaughn, Luis Alvarado, thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
After losing her father to dementia,